Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Well, Joe, it was a disappointing afternoon for the Devils in Lubbock, Texas, falling in their first ever Big 12 game. But as Cam Scadaboo said, that was kind of the capper of three distinct seasons that the Sun Devils are going to play in 2024. And 3-1 is pretty good in kind of the grand scheme. And I know it's kind of maybe a little ahead of most people's expectations.
Yeah, as we chop it up here with ASU entering its first bye week of the season, they're brought down to earth a little bit with the first loss of the 2024 campaign. So obviously there's positivity. There are areas for concern. There's a lot to look up ahead to. ASU schedule gets pretty tough here in the final 2/3 of the schedule. So a lot to mix around and talk about in review and look ahead. So even though the Devils aren't playing a game this weekend, still a lot we got to chop it up about.
Yeah, and so we're going to take kind of a macro view, kind of what we have learned and some questions that have arisen over these first four games. And there's really nobody else that we'd rather bring in at this point to chop it up like that than Ralph Amsden, who will be joining us a little bit later after we kind of review what happened in Lubbock. But before we do all that, Joe, let's dive into some of the key news items. First and foremost, some unfortunate news on the injury front, even on the bye week. Kenny Dillingham has revealed that Nickelback Cole Martin will be out for the year. Now, since he played as a true freshman at Oregon a year ago, he will be able to use a redshirt season, maintaining the year of eligibility. But really unfortunate for the former four-star recruit, product of Basha High School here in the Valley. Really high upside player. Kyan McDonald, the true freshman, will be seeing some action as the primary backup at nickel to Shamari Simmons.
Yeah, that's a blow. It's a blow to the depth. He's a talented player, of course, that came over from Oregon. Someone that, very plausibly could have a chance to be a starter next year. Now ASU obviously is very well equipped in the secondary, especially at those safety and nickelback positions. So, again, he wasn't necessarily a starting competitor at this particular point, but we all know how important depth is, and he's a talented player. So you never want to lose any. But ASU feels pretty good about being able to cushion that blow and look ahead. But he's someone that certainly, in all likelihood, has a very talented future, very bright future in Tempe.
All right, so some news on the scheduling front. Even though the Devils won't be in action this weekend, they return at home on the October 5th, Saturday. I believe it's the Maroon Monsoon game against Kansas. That game, October 5th, still maybe a little warm. 5 p.m. kickoff, TV on ESPN2.
Yeah, and that feels it could be right, could be wrong, but it kind of feels like a difference in conferences. The 5 p.m. time slot doesn't feel like one that was too commonly done in the Pac-12. Like usually it was those 7:30s, or maybe the much earlier in the day, or like the noon 1 o'clock time frame. So that's a good little middle ground. Yeah, especially I haven't looked ahead because obviously a lot of folks are displeased about after a pretty nice weather weekend. Things are still really hot here this week. We'll see how things present themselves weather-wise coming into next week when Kansas comes to town. But you're hoping that if there is heat, that it can be to ASU's advantage, because as we will break down, at least in my opinion, that is a crucial game, almost in the make or break capacity, almost in the must-win capacity. So you want every advantage you can for ASU.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, as you mentioned. Yeah, this is the start of like 4 or 5 straight days of 110. Of course, Sunday was the first official day of fall, so of course Arizona is doing very Arizona things. So hopefully, maybe in a week's time, maybe the Heat will be there and plays ASU's advantage, or maybe for the sake of the fans, that'll probably be in the sunlight for about an hour and a half of that game from kickoff. They get a little bit of a reprieve there. Some good news, though, Joe, on the recruiting front. It's been a little quiet there, of course, with the season kicking off. That's not unsurprising. But ASU got a good start to their 2026 class, getting a blue-chip recruit in quarterback Jake Fette from El Paso. 4-star prospect, 6'2", 190-pounder, ranked by Rivals as the 14th best pro-style quarterback in the country. And after the Texas State game, in the post-game presser, I asked Kenny Dillingham, what was it like, or what did it mean to get the win win in the state of Texas? He said it was great, and immediately pivoted to say, I'm not leaving the state. I'm actually going on a recruiting visit to El Paso the next morning at 7 a.m., I believe, and that was to see Jake Fette, and that turned into a major commitment and a nice recruiting win for ASU for the 26 class.
Yeah, that's big. You always want to lock up your quarterbacks as quickly as possible. So someone that's, more than a year away from graduating, that's a big deal for ASU to claim at this point. As you mentioned, a solid 4-star competitor, ranked in the top 40 in the state of Texas, at least for now, number 32. So obviously a lot of great ball played in Texas. So if you're in that capacity, you're doing some big time things. A lot of Big 12 schools were after him, and certainly still may be. Now, obviously, when you get a commitment of this nature so far ahead of time, you always look down the chute of the amount of time that remains until that player can sign. And that's even a thing that, who knows what changes will come about as far as signing periods over the next bit of time. But yeah, you got to be happy about getting that start, especially at that position.
Yeah, getting a marquee player like that, especially at the quarterback position, often can be a catalyst for getting the rest of the class as it fills out over the next year plus. Of course, 2025's class early signing period just still a couple months away, but getting a player of the caliber of Fette is a nice early recruiting win for the Devils, and I believe by my count he's the 15th commit since Dillingham was hired on from the state of Texas over the last few classes. So continuing the Texas to Tempe pipeline, and it's a good time to talk to the newest Sun Devil. But before we dive into that, just bringing you a quick word from the good folks at the good brand, homefieldapparel.com. Of course, we've been telling you about them for a long time now, the maker of premium vintage collegiate apparel, shirts, hats, hoodies. The weather, after this last hurrah of summer is going to be turning hopefully a little bit. So especially with the holiday season, get the long sleeves ready for you. Also, they are dropping a new Howard collection this Thursday at 7 a.m. Arizona time. Nice 12-piece collection. And they just dropped a huge new selection of the heavyweight tees. Now, these vintage heavyweight tees are 100% cotton, garment-dyed, vintage fit to the standard tees that are so comfortable, and I pretty much wear one every day. So check them out at homefieldapparel.com. Proud to continue that partnership for another season. But as we mentioned, Jake Fette is the newest addition to the Sun Devils recruiting class. So had a chance to catch up with him earlier this morning, and a lot of good things to say from the newest Sun Devil commit. All right, Jake, let's start off with the big question. Why was Arizona State the right choice for you?
I really like Dillingham, Arroyo, the recruiting guy, Trent. It's not so professional with them, I could talk to them as if they're a normal person. So it's nice to have that deeper connection other than just professional all the time.
So after the Texas State game and the post-game press conference, I asked Kenny Dillingham what it meant to get a win in Texas, and he said it was great, but then he immediately said, I'm sticking around. I've got to go visit a recruit in El Paso. Turned out to be you. What did it mean to have the head coach of a Power 4 program make the time out of his schedule to come visit you and see in action?
It's real cool to have a head coach come down and watch you play. It's a real cool and exciting experience. It meant a lot to me.
What really kind of jumps out to you most in getting to know Kenny Dillingham? Obviously a younger guy, one of the youngest coaches in the country, but what things about him kind of jump out to you and impress you most, make you want to play for him?
That he's a real face-to-face person, He'll FaceTime you instead of text you. When he wants to talk to you, he'll have real face-to-face conversations with you, and I really appreciate that.
Now, you have, I believe, had an experience down here at an ASU recruiting camp in June. What were some of the things that kind of jumped out to you there, being able to kind of see things up close?
It's cool. So you go to all these camps throughout the summer, and you see how different coaches run them. So some schools, it's just like a tryout. They're standing in the back while you're throwing and just doing what they tell you. But at that camp, I was actually pulled and getting coached at the camp instead of just out there throwing like I was some kind of puppy. I was getting actively coached throughout the entire thing, and it meant a lot to me.
So why was right now the right time to make this commitment, and also kind of how does it feel to have this decision, this big decision kind of done, completed going forward?
I never thought I was going to commit this early, but when I got to know all the ASU dudes, I knew this was the school where I wanted to be, so I was just going to get on it as soon as possible.
So, watching the ASU off to a pretty nice 3-1 start on their season so far, in your time, checking them out in action so far this season, what things have jumped out to seeing your future program in action?
I really enjoy their offense and the way they run things. You know, they have an athletic quarterback in Sam Levitt, and I think I compared to him pretty well. Coach says I does, so seeing him have success in that program and system, it makes me excited to play in it.
Now, speaking of that skill set, for any listeners and viewers that have not seen you in action, maybe not caught your game film, give those folks a self-scouting report. What kind of skills do you bring to an offense?
You know, I'm an athletic dude. I try to stay in the pocket as much as I can, but with my genetics and how blessed I am, I'm able to extend a play, and make something happen when there's nothing.
Now, of course, a big part of playing the quarterback position is a leadership aspect. How would you describe your leadership style?
Being a younger quarterback last year, it was hard to be a vocal leader because you're first stepping into the position. But as I grow older and mature, I've been way more vocal and like telling the team and stuff this year than I was last year. Last year, I was more of just a lead by example kind of guy.
So, even off the field, Kenny Dillingham is really kind of over the last couple of years really try to bring in a certain character of individual into the program. So what kind of person, off the field is this son of a program getting?
You have to be a good person off the field to be a good person on the field, I don't believe in thinking you're the best at all times, everyone's able to grow and you're always able to help others and others could always help you.
So when you look at this Sun Devil offense, what are specifically some of the things that you like about what Kenny Dillingham, Marcus Arroyo, and their offensive scheme, brings to a field, and what it's like for a quarterback to run it?
It's real exciting. It's a lot like the NFL. You don't always. It's not just going to be gun all the time. You're not just going to be an empty throwing the ball. It's an NFL based system, so that's real cool to get to learn a system like that in college when nowadays it seems like everyone wants to run empty and everyone just wants to let it loose,
So, of course, you're the latest commitment in a pretty long string at this point of the Texas to Tempe pipeline. A lot of Texans on this roster. What does it mean to see like this your future program have such an important on your home state of Texas?
It's really exciting. You're going to be able to connect with dudes when you come from the same place, same home state. So it's really exciting.
So I've talked to a lot of the Texans on this roster, and I'd like to ask them this question because they all have some very interesting answers. What makes Texas high school players different?
I think the competition level. Texas is a huge football school. Everyone gets into it, whether you're an old person or a young person, so it's really exciting. It's just everything's a little more intense.
So obviously, you're playing ball in El Paso. What's the football scene like out there in West Texas?
It's different than what you see other places in the state. We throw the ball a lot, but once we get into playoffs and we play teams like Lubbock and Amarillo, they're more run heavy, so it's different than what we usually see.
So you're the first commitment in ASU's 2026 class, especially as a quarterback as well. Is this something that now that you're locked in, that you're going to be trying to rally some other talented folks across the country to join you in Tempe?
Oh, for sure. Especially being a quarterback, the team is built around you pretty much. So you want weapons around you so that they can help you when you get to the college.
Now, being a guy, a blue chip recruit, so many lofty rankings amongst all the recruiting services, does that add a little pressure, or is it kind of a nice validation to know that you're on the right track?
It's cool, but I don't really think rankings mean much. You could have a bad season, you drop. You have a good season, you're up there. So I believe that rankings don't mean much, but it's cool to see sometimes. See that people actually think you're good and all that.
So, of course, your season's off to a pretty good start. I believe the team's off to a 3-0 start. What are some of the things that kind of jump out to you about your team's early success and, your performance in those games?
We have real good team chemistry. I've been playing with a lot of these dudes since I was 5 or 6 years old. So being around those dudes when you grow up, it makes it exciting, especially to have a team as good as we do this year. Everyone's excited to play. Coaches making sure everyone's healthy, making sure we have a good scheme. So it's real fun.
So where do you feel that since starting taking over last year and through this season, where you've made the greatest strides in your game and grown, and where do you want to continue that growth, in the year plus until you get to college?
I think I've done a much better job being more of a leader this year. Last year I was one of the youngest dudes on the team, so it was kind of hard for me. But as you grow, you realize that you need to be the leader, especially at the quarterback position. And then what I need to get better at is I need to make sure my footwork's more sound and I'm not bailing the pocket too early.
So ultimately, when that day comes and you're running out of Tillman Tunnel and the maroon and gold, what do you think the thoughts and emotions are going to be for you in that moment?
It's just going to be exciting, It's real cool. It's a lifelong dream, When you're little, all you want to do is play on TV, play for a good school. So it'll be real cool.
All right, Joe, it is hard to win in the Big 12. It's even harder to win on the road in the Big 12. And it's, I would say, borderline impossible when you spend about the first quarter of a game consistently shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, that was a rough start. I mean, that was one thing that had been kind of a hallmark of ASU for its, first three games, even as weird as the Texas State game got, in the first half. ASU had been really good about getting off to very good starts. We talked about it last week, and I thought that the Sun Devils, if I'm not mistaken, might have scored touchdowns or at least some points on all their first possessions and didn't allow that from the opposition. Again, that helps you win games, and we can get off to good starts. But the way that things turned out there in Lubbock, I mean, getting down 2 scores, before even the midway point of the first quarter, I mean, that just really set the tone, and it made it obviously impossible for ASU to come back. I mean, they put themselves in such a hole early that's really tough to battle back from. And on top of that, or at least what was a catalyst toward that, as you mentioned, shooting yourself in the foot with just some untimely, unnecessary, and in at least one instance, just kind of boneheaded plays, penalties, things like that are you can't have in any game, and you can't have be consistently occurring throughout the course of the season. And in this game, they, in many cases, just about proved to be the difference makers.
Yeah, that's a game ASU had a chance to win, even with the mistakes. But if you take away and play just the standard first 8-9 minutes of Sun Devil football that we've seen through the first 3 games, I mean this very much could have been a flipped result. But the opening kickoff is squibbed out of bounds, given a dangerous Texas Tech offense. Some good starting field position. You mentioned the penalties there. Miles Rouser getting a key third down sack, and then just standing over Baron Morton, and it's something that is really just you can't do. And that Rouser went on to have a really good rest of the game, but that was a crucial penalty at that moment, and that cost ASU some field position. That thankfully didn't end up costing them points in that drive, but just those consistent penalties. Now they cleaned things up a little bit, and we'll dive into, but like the defense got better as they made some adjustments after allowing touchdowns on the first couple drives, and just one total penalty by the Devils in the second half after a first half that was full of them from both sides. But just a lot of uncharacteristic, and that was a word that was bandied about in the post-game presser as well, just kind of uncharacteristic penalties. And I think ultimately that's an effort that probably a lot of the Sun Devils had a real tough time looking at themselves in the mirror on Sunday morning.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it you can boil down to just how the first, half of the first quarter and the first couple possessions of the third quarter went. I mean, those pretty much added up the difference in the game. I mean, if you take those, again, basically the first 2 possessions Texas Tech had of the game and their first possession of the second half, those 3 possessions alone, I mean, that's really the difference maker there, because ASU did its best to put itself in a good position heading into the half, although allowing Texas Tech to move the ball very quickly for points at the end of the second quarter, even though it still kept it within a touchdown since they, limited the Red Raiders to a field goal. Again, these things, just letting opportunities slip through their hands or causing opportunities not to materialize for them. And, we talk about it being uncharacteristic, but we need to figure out if it's uncharacteristic, because this team, and that's the biggest thing I think I took away from this game, is this is a team that is still in search of an identity. You don't know what they're great at. You don't know what they're circumstantially good at. And again, you talk about the penalty thing. Hopefully it's uncharacteristic, because ASU's got a very difficult schedule up ahead, and to commit so many and so many significant penalties, I mean, that's going to get you in the loss column more weeks than it won't.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, certainly, but we've had the 3 data points in the wins and the resiliency and the run game and solid defense, and then you see this thing. All these things just kind of fall apart. So now that they're getting into the Big 12 schedule, you mentioned things are really going to get more difficult. There's more than a few ranked teams left on the schedule. There's more than a few hostile road environments to come. And speaking of that hostile road environment, I think that's one thing that we should dive into is a guy who caught a lot of flack from the fan base for his performance, and I think to a degree deserved, but also a little bit unfair because he's still a redshirt freshman. Sam Leavitt, the quarterback, first time this season we really saw some freshman moments. Some of the throws that got away from him, some of the the other things that he's shown some great poise, and going back to the Texas State win and rallying the team. He just really looked like a freshman in this game, and even some of the plays that he did, I think, do pretty well. And even Kenny Dillingham cited the Jake Smith deep bomb that Jake's he said he lost it in the sun and kind of fell. That's probably should have been a 70-yard touchdown, and to open up the third quarter, and all of a sudden that the dynamic of the game shifts radically. But altogether, that was not Sam Leavitt's finest moment, but saw a lot of fans piling on. And, some criticism is deserved because there were plays that he left out on the field, the types of plays he's made in the first 3 weeks. But at the same point, he is still a redshirt freshman, third or fourth career start. So I would say this is probably a game full of learning moments and a lot of tape to learn from.
Yeah, I think for him and for a lot of this team, really eager to see how they treat the bye week, what they do with the bye week, what we see from them after the bye week, because I feel like I'll say it a lot on this show, is the Kansas game coming up on October the 5th, I feel is a must-win game. And it is a winnable game against a team with one of the poorer records in the conference, even though they were, I believe, a ranked team in the preseason and have had a string of success lately. So that's what I'm looking toward again, because we're trying to figure out the identity of this team. We're trying to figure out the capabilities of this team. And when you think of a team in football, you're more often than not going to first think about the quarterback, no matter who he is. And as you mentioned, fans are so quick, so trigger happy when it comes to comments and things like that. I'm curious just to kind of settle it down and see where the pieces fall out. I mean, yes, it was concerning that ASU wasn't able to do certain things offensively, given what Texas Tech's defense had allowed in the games leading up to this contest. But we'll see if that equates to anything. So that's why it's really hard for me to, categorize this team and look at these first 4 games and really draw any sort of legitimate conclusions, because there are a lot of different ways you can dissect what's happened. And again, we'll see, because the competition is going to be there. So if Sam Leavitt is up to the challenge, if he's someone that can be, a solid playmaking starter, or if he's someone that's going to create concerns, that is going to prove itself here very, very soon.
Yeah, so I think that the jury's still out on Sam Leavitt. I do think that he's had a really good first 4 games altogether when you take the totality of what we've seen, and I'm still very confident that he's going to be able to put in a better efforts. But one of the things that you've mentioned identity a couple of times, and coming in, I think especially during our preseason roundtable, we all thought this was going to be a team that was going to be built on kind of defense and the run game, and that was the template that led them to some big impressive victories in weeks 1 and 2. Now, the defense rallied well in week 3 against Texas State. Run game just really wasn't there until some key moments at the end. Really just struggled again. And I know last week I questioned whether it was going to the struggles against Texas State were fatigue, short week based in terms of not having the prep for the odd front that the Bobcats ran and all that stuff. But having those extra days of rest, those extra days of prep, and to still have the struggles on the ground. The offensive line is still a great concern to me. Even the interior, which I thought was the strength, is starting to worry me a little bit, because they're just having to have the ability to get those lanes. And ASU was 0 for 3 on the day on 4th down, getting stopped on a 4th and 1 with Scadaboo. That's something you thought might have been unfathomable based on what we've seen the first couple of weeks. But if that part of the identity isn't there, if the ability to run the game, to have success on the ground and kind of open things up and take the burden off of your young quarterback who's learning on the job, that could spell some significant struggles for the Devils down the stretch.
And again, pointing toward that October 5th game, I know ASU is expected to get healthier at the running back position, because that is something that since the second game, if you exclude the opener, that's the only one where you really saw that depth in action in the ways that we were, thinking and hoping that it would be at running back. Now, obviously, health issues and other matters, have been what they are. So if you can use this bye week appropriately and get healthy and bring a fuller pile of players out there to be able to do their thing, that can certainly help. Now, obviously, again, as you mentioned, the offensive line, you gotta have at least some measure of concern for sure across the board, because you should have done more against Texas Tech. You really should have not had the issues that you did against Texas State, even in a victory there. So the last two games, there's certainly means for concern, because again, I know I've brought up the forthcoming schedule on a few occasions, but when we're stepping back and reflecting on things here at the bye week, you think about what you've done, but you also think about who you've done it against. And this is, part of probably a later discussion, but ASU's first two opponents of this season are not really doing any favors to anybody that's beaten them as far as trying to make that look like a good win. Wyoming and Mississippi State are having very, very poor seasons. So a lot's going to unfold. I think we're still in a lot of capacities we don't really know where we land. Because when you win the first three games of the season, usually that is a beacon of a good year. But then also you have a season like 2016 where ASU went 3-0 or 4-0, 4-1, something like that, but definitely 3-0, and they finished 5-7. So not necessarily a guarantee. So there is a lot of work to do this bye week.
Yeah, and closing out real quick on the defense. Obviously, we talked about just the awful first couple drives, something very uncharacteristic in terms of the fast starts ASU's gotten off to over the first three games. But they made some nice adjustments, and Kenny said that they were really kind of adjusting to make Texas Tech into a run-first game. And they really, I thought, bottled up one of the nation's best backs in Taj Brooks outside of kind of one big run on the day, and that really kind of settled things down, allowed ASU's offense to slowly and ploddingly get them back in the game. But the thing that really kind of jumped out to me is, perhaps Rouser's dumb penalty excluded, that the secondary continues to be. I thought the defense would be good, but the secondary for me has so far exceeded expectations.
Yeah, especially at the safety and nickelback positions. You're still seeing the work in progress and some growing pains with some of the cornerbacks. Especially that was kind of part of that early stretch in those first couple of drives. And you can take that back, of course, to the Texas State game. You can even take it back to the Mississippi State game. So, the position groups are kind of performing as we thought. The safeties, nickelback, we expected to be certainly a strength of the defense and one of the top tier strengths of the entire team, and figured that the cornerback position would be something that would take more time to come around, and hopefully that it would come around. So even though there have been certainly measures of good play there, but that's an area where you hope that there's greater consistency. And it does make sense when you have a very young player and a guy like Keith Nabney, who just hasn't seen a lot of the field, obviously, before this season. There are going to be some growing pains, some developmental, moments there. You just hope that as the season goes on, it doesn't show itself in these massive catastrophic plays, touchdown plays, drive extending plays, and you can really, hunker down and have that entire secondary be a collectively strong unit.
Yeah, some more reinforcements on the way. Of course, they got Jordan Crook back, Zach Swanson back in the fold. A guy like Jake Kungaika will certainly be needed down the stretch with some of these rush attacks that it's coming up for the Devils. But altogether, Joe, I think when you take a look back, it was just a day where this loss, I don't know the best way to put it in like ASU fan speak, but it just kind of felt different. Like, not to like silver line it or anything, but like, even still, like even after the horrible start, they showed good fight and got back into the game. And granted, these were a lot of Herm and Erickson era like tomfoolery off the top in the first 8-9 minutes of the game that ultimately cost them. But I not to say like this is a good loss, because it was a game ASU absolutely should have been much more competitive and had a chance to win. But I at least I think that this is maybe another lesson or a growth opportunity for this young team, that in this year that it really is all about just getting better and setting themselves up for the future.
Yeah, if it can be a learning opportunity, then that's a very important lesson to learn. I mean, you think about, and I'll certainly preface this by saying I'm not saying I expect this sort of outcome this year, given the comparison I'm about to make, but even seasons like 2013, 2014, double-digit win seasons, division championship seasons, you had some, pretty rough losses within the first month of the season, within the first 4 or 5 games of the season. I think back when losing to Stanford in 2013 and Notre Dame, losing to UCLA, getting just obliterated there. So there have been very, very, very good seasons. The best seasons ASU's had in the last 20, 25 years, almost 30 years, have certainly come with some major stumbling blocks in the early portion. Doesn't mean that your season is completely off track. The thing that I hope to see, and it'll allow me to differentiate, was this a good lesson to learn, or is this just a problematic issue that isn't solved and may not be solved, is just how it's applied moving forward. Because if you play that first, half of a first quarter against Utah, like ASU did against Texas Tech, you're going to get obliterated. Now, then, if you clean that up and remember how to be highly competitive and in fact take the advantages in the first quarter and first handful of minutes of the first quarter, first few possessions for each team, then that's how maybe you can sneak up on some teams, because ASU is going to have to do that down the stretch. They have 4 ranked teams remaining over the course of the remaining 8 games. So again, really going to be interested to see how the bye week treats them, how they come out against Kansas, especially at home against a vulnerable team. If there's a lethargic approach, if it's anywhere reminiscent of what we saw against Texas Tech, then yeah, that's going to be a concern. But if they learn their lesson, if they come out with some piss and vinegar ready to go, and if that continues week after week, then yes, this loss can have positive lessons to it.
All right, 1/3 of the Sun Devils season is in the books. On the surface, 3-1, pretty good record, but they're of course coming off the disappointing loss at Texas Tech, like Joe and I just broke down. So what does it all mean? Well, there's really nobody else that we'd rather bring in at this point to dive in, to break everything down, than Ralph Amsden, making appearance number 47. You're almost to the big 5-0. How's it feel?
Oh, no. 47.
Yeah.
Ugh, I don't like that. That's Aaron Francisco's number. He was supposed to be in coverage on Santonio Holmes, who may or may not have had 2 feet down.
I have some compelling evidence that shows that both are down.
It's also Josh Hubner's number, if I'm not mistaken. And Hubner is an all-time American, so there's light.
Yeah, I think he is being blocked on Twitter for sure.
All right. It's probably not a short list either.
No, it's an all-time American move.
Already falling off the rails. Let's
dive into some rails. They never were rails.
Railless Ralph. Here we go. Guys, let's kind of go into a little wide-ranging discussion here on some of the key topics and some things that we've learned over the course of 4 weeks, but also, of course, some of the questions, because as Joe and I talked about off the top, things are only going to get more difficult for the Devils as the season progresses, now that the heart of Big 12 play is here. But as we always got to do, in the center of all the discourse, the quarterback position is. All right, so guys, how do you feel kind of as a 4-game set, not just necessarily the kind of the freshman-filled moments of the Texas Tech game, but overall, Sam Leavitt, how's he doing?
Who's going first?
Take it away, Ralph.
Paper, rock, scissors? Or rock, paper, scissors, however you're supposed to say it. Here's the deal. He has not been as accurate as he needs to be for ASU to have been 4-0. But he was accurate enough to go 3-1. So I think that there is no surprise for people who were at spring practice or fall practice or red practice reports that this was going to be an issue. And whether or not it's correctable kind of depends on what the issue is, right? Is it a footwork thing? Is it, he takes a lot of hits? Could that affect his accuracy as the game goes on? But it's something that kind of, it persists. Is it an arm angle thing? Is it being on the same page as your receivers? Is it excitement, right? It could be anything. But there's certainly an accuracy issue there. and I think he's probably learning some lessons out on the run. And I'd imagine if they had a game to play this week, might be a tough week to practice after some of the hits he took in Lubbock. But at the same time, his ability to move the chains with his legs and the fact that he has been able to find some receivers who pick up some yards after the catch have been encouraging. It's just a matter of what adjustments need to be made. And I hear a lot of people saying, well, experience. The adjustment will be experience. I don't know if experience has an effect on accuracy, right? There's been quarterbacks who are big, strong guys with very strong arms. Brian Lewerke, who ASU played against when he was at Michigan State, never really got the accuracy there, had every other tool, So for some people, it's a correctable issue. A lot of people talked about it with Josh Allen when he went into the NFL. Now he's going on like 5 straight seasons of 5,000 yards of offense. So I don't know, but I do know that we've at this point 4 games in probably exhausted the reasons, right? Oh, first in conference road game, first start, first weekday road game Central Standard Time, first time rolling left, throwing a deep ball, like all the first stuff. That's all kind of going away now that we're a third of the way into the season. He's got more experience than a few of the quarterbacks that have played for ASU over the last few years as far as reps he's gotten in maroon and gold. So I don't know. We're kind of in a wait and see place, but I think the true concerns are accuracy and the level of punishment he's taking as a runner.
And I think, so many folks, myself included, were really excited when he finally got that deep one to hit Jordan Tyson at Texas State, and figured maybe that would open up the confidence and whatever other qualities are necessary to, keep that sort of thing going. I think that, he's a microcosm of a team as a whole, where if those things, like Ralph mentioned, can be corrected, or at least corrected to a level where you move the needle in a positive direction, and that goes for Levin and others across the team as well, it can remain an exciting season. It's a daunting schedule coming up. I mean, that there's a lot of pieces we could talk about with there. And not only is it daunting in the sense of ASU has a lot of difficult teams on its schedule, but the evaluation of the schedule in the preseason is, at least so far, proving to be accurate in the sense of ASU is missing all the teams that are struggling, with maybe one exception. So that's going to require that this team really improve, because the nature of the teams that it's played really pale in comparison to the ones that are up ahead. So those issues that have caused, whether it's a loss at Texas Tech or the issues that caused the Texas State game to be, much more chaotic than maybe it otherwise should have been, or allow Mississippi State to battle back in the late stages of that game. You take all those pieces together, and yeah, if they can't be corrected at least to a satisfactory degree, that's going to be concerning. And now, again, taking it back to Sam Leavitt, I certainly think that you need to be generally pleased. Obviously, last year the quarterback position barely even really existed for ASU, so there's that part of it. But again, yeah, there's going to be a lot of eyes on him and how things go over these 8 remaining games, and obviously not only just how that applies for this season and what the final outcome is for ASU this year, but what that means for the future, and if people are going to be clamoring for ASU to hit the portal once again for a new quarterback. Yeah, I would add this. Call them excuses, call them reasons. They could be facts, they could be feelings. Regardless, they are the things that have been given as context for Sam Leavitt's growing pains, or whatever you want to call it. Those things can't just apply to your quarterback. And at some point, you do reach a level of where you have to say, why does that apply to him and not to me? Right. So Kenny Dillingham in the post game says, there's a couple of throws that Sam Leavitt needs to make. There's a couple of plays we have to make for him. Right. In the Mississippi State game, Kenny Dillingham said it's on me
because I never got him into rhythm. After the Wyoming game, it was like, well, we didn't really have a reason to need him to do much, so it's okay. The reasons you give have to apply to the other players on your team. And here we are 4 games into the season. Arizona State has 33 wide receiver receptions. 33. It's an average of about 8 a game. And to put it in context, Travis Hunter has 36 catches by himself. Nick Nash at San Jose State with Coach Ken, who ran the triple option at Navy, has 50 by himself. ASU as a group, at a very deep, experienced receiver position, has 33. You are going to want to get some of these players involved because they're also going to be saying, hey, I need to be in a rhythm too. It doesn't just apply to your quarterback. But if the only opportunity Jake Smith gets is on a deep ball, then why don't those same things apply to the other players on your team? So they have to, if they want to make sure that they don't end up with a, hey, rules for thee and not for me locker room, they have to make sure that those things apply to everybody. So it's not our receiver's fault that Sam Levitt isn't where he needs to be yet, but we need to do things to get our receivers in rhythm, which will then benefit Sam Levitt, maybe give him a little bit more confidence. So I would say that as long as we're making sure that we are not giving reasons for the struggles of one player, being very protective of him, and then turning around and saying, well, everybody else just needs to make a play. That can't be the case, because if that continues for too long, then you're going to end up with a divided locker room.
Yeah, I think overall Sam has been pretty good. And I feel cautiously optimistic to moderately confident that he can be maybe not an all-time great, but a guy who can be a really good quarterback in this league. And I think the reasons for that, I really like kind of the intangible aspects, the leadership that he's grown, because where he was in spring to where he is now, to being voted by his peers to the Pat Tillman Leadership Council, pretty significant growth there. But on the field, I really been impressed with the up until the Texas Tech game, the poise, the pocket presence, kind of the awareness, some of those things that quarterbacks either have or they don't have. And also, having seen most of his practices, everyone in spring and fall camp and such, his accuracy is not the strongest suit, but it's better than we've seen. So I'm not sure if it's maybe just doing it under the bright lights, and maybe it's taking some time. Maybe he does need to feel more comfortable and get in more rhythm, because I think the rapport with Jordan Tyson's there. I just don't know that it's out there with anybody else, because Melquan Stovall has been barely a factor. Jake Smith's been barely a factor. You mentioned like 33 overall as a position group for a group that we talked about all offseason long as being probably one of the deepest on this team. Well, they're to this point not showing it. The accuracy issues, it's long been said that it's one of those things that quarterbacks either have or they don't have, and Josh Allen is kind of one of those oft-cited outliers in that respect, in terms of he was like a 50-some-odd% passer at Wyoming, and now he's routinely one of the best, most accurate passers in the NFL in Buffalo of all places. So,
well, you just used the acronym that I think creates a lot of this discussion amongst the fan base. You said NFL, and I think that if Kenny Dillingham had not publicly stated that we have 2 NFL guys in our locker room, then it's possible that less people would be holding him to that type of standard, right? And at this point in time, he's 3 for 20 on throws 20 yards or more down the field. He had early on, now obviously this is a few weeks ago now, but he missed Melquan Stovall on a bubble. He missed Xavier Guillory on a slant that would have put the Mississippi State game away, when Kenny Dillingham was trying to get him in rhythm at a time when they probably shouldn't have even been passing the ball at all. There have been a couple of drops. Mateer's been hit and miss, but at the same time, like these accuracy issues, like we've seen receiver body language start to shift a little bit. Whether it's, Jordan Tyson, when a ball goes out of the back of the end zone, you watch his shoulders drop a little bit. Jake Smith, when he was running down an overthrown ball in the Mississippi State game, this isn't frustration with the quarterback, but you can see just like, He wants to get a touchdown. He hasn't scored in like over 1,000 days, right? And then you saw Guillory quietly let him know, like, hey, you got to get that ball in. So, it's one of these things where I think this team expects to win at this point. They got a bunch of super seniors on the offensive line. They've got one of the better running backs in the conference, if not the country, and they've got a receiver group that is itching to get involved, but have to, amongst the 6 or 7 that play, split 8 catches a game. And receivers, they'll get antsy. So, I am encouraged by what I see, but it feels like this. The entire team is being held to the standard of we are going to win right now, while the quarterback is being held to the standard of we are breaking him in for the purpose of development. But that's a house of cards, right? And it can't stand against itself. At some point, one of those philosophies is going to win out. And you have Arizona State against Texas Tech. It was like the 3rd most unexpected loss based on the data of the entire weekend. Just based on the data alone, based on the fact that for 55 minutes, ASU was really winning the game. You get down 14-0 in the first 5-6 minutes, then you outscore them 22-16 the rest of the way. So I don't know.
And I think added to that is, if we're talking about, fan criticism or a lack of patience among the fan group, is not just who's here, but who's not here. You think about the fact that essentially Leavitt is the guy, and Jaden Rashada, was put in a position to relocate elsewhere. And I know for a fact that, Sun Devil fans certainly don't want to, a couple years from now, experience another scenario like they had with that fellow who was playing quarterback in the state of Louisiana for a couple years there. So I think that all comes to a head because there's been so much of a revolving door at quarterback for this program in the last 3-4 years that obviously the fans just want someone to be the guy, and they want the guy who's anointed to be the guy to be the guy. So we've heard a lot of talk. You mentioned, the NFL comparisons for a real young guy, and that's going to get into folks' heads. That's going to, whether it's internally or externally. And so you put that all together and you have, a 3-0 start, and people look at things differently. Not everybody has, detailed knowledge of every team that you're playing week over week, and think if you start 3-0, then you'll beat everybody that you play, or something to that effect. So there's a lot that goes into this, especially when it comes to the public perception aspect, because you might have people who want to prevent the scenario saying, oh, I wish that instead of this guy that stayed here for a few years, that he would have hit the bricks or never came here, and this other guy who left would have stayed here. Those are I feel like sometimes fans get inside their own head and start to look ahead with that sort of fear.
Yeah, the fear of missing out, which is one of the things that's driving players to hit the portal. It's affecting fans as well, because your comparison's the thief of joy. And honestly, man, I feel bad for how hard Jalen Daniels is going to get booed when he comes in with Kansas in a couple of weeks, just because ASU fans are ready to take their angst out on somebody with Daniels on the back of their jersey. Nobody wants to feel like they got hoodwinked. Nobody wants to feel like they're missing out. And it's almost just as bad for the people who are paying attention to what's going on elsewhere and aren't just in their Sun Devil bubble and pleasantly surprised by whether a team is good or bad once they show up on Saturday. Because you start looking at what everybody has, you start coveting, right? Because we are in a season where, if you played against Wyoming and you saw a couple of players that you liked, you're like, hey, why can't we make a little X-Valide situation out of this, Or you play against a team like Texas Tech and Jalen Conyers scores, and you're like, I'm traitor, or whatever else you want to say, and you can't. Hopefully, people are learning some lessons that you just can't live and die with this stuff. The expectation for Arizona State from Las Vegas, 4.5 wins, from Pro Football Focus, who was always wrong, 5.5. You have all these expectations that are set. You should understand that these are people that are paid a lot of money to be expectation setters. And you should look at 3-1 and say, your Price is Right style, we have 8 chances left to get 3 wins. And I think that should ease a lot of people's anxiety, but instead we head into a bye week after a loss. And for some people, the sky is falling.
Yeah, that to me is interesting, especially around the quarterback discourse, and the lack of patience. And I know that that's a cliche at this point of just these days and everything. It's just people want now, but this is still a guy who just has made 4 starts, and whether his ultimate ceiling is a guy who's maybe a 55% passer and good with the legs, and he's a solid quarterback in the conference, or he's able to increase and improve in the accuracy era, and he's an upper 60s guy that ultimately can maybe be an all-conference type, and ASU can really start to make a run in 25, 26, 27 or whatever, because this is a young team. 39 of the top 44 on the depth chart has got at least a year, if not more, eligibility. So, I mean, I don't know. I know we're going to get to this a little bit later, but this hot start might have messed with people's heads, timelines, expectations in terms of just not just the quarterback position, but the team as a whole. So it's going to be interesting to see just if Levitt continues to have a good game and then another freshman game or a hard game, because there's some mighty good defenses left on this slate. But overall, I would say I feel pretty confident in what I've seen that his development. You have a couple guys on that coaching staff that have pretty decent track records in terms of quarterback development, and I just hope that people don't just get too caught up in one data point of just a very disappointing loss, and some of the ways that that loss happened and all the self-inflicted stuff that the team did. Maybe if ASU doesn't have all those penalties and had those defensive lapses and doesn't fall behind 14-0, and it is a competitive game, ASU somehow gets it, and Sam still has an up and down game. How does that change the discourse we've heard for the last 3-4 days now?
Yeah, I mean, winning cures everything. I mean, if ASU would have won that game in any capacity and been 4-0, I don't know that you're hearing too much. Even if Levitt still has the full body work that he had against Texas Tech. I mean, it's a deal where winning cures just about everything. So it's easy, and it's the quarterback is typically the scapegoat, even if he doesn't deserve it, and when he does, it's just even further amplified.
Well, for people who are curious what the tightrope is, right? Because there's criticism of people who are like, everything is, like the sky is falling, and then I see a lot of this, especially on the Facebook. You'll see people say like, Levitt isn't it, which alone as a criticism is, there's a lot to that just isn't. It's hard to even respond to, but the response to it has been, oh, you would have run off Jake Plummer after his freshman year. And I just want to jump in and say, in context, yes, that's a different era of football. That's a completely different thing. And no, you don't have the ability to learn the position in college anymore. You just don't have that. And so, yeah, Jake Plummer would have gotten run off if he existed today and he had a Jaden Daniels 2021 10 touchdown, 10 interception season. He would get a huge vote of no confidence from a bunch of the fan base. That's just the truth. The tightrope is this. You want your team to win. This is edge number 1. You see things they could do better. And then you could just walk that. It is perfectly fine to, if you know what you're talking about, critique what is going on with a player or play call, and at the same time, hope that they win. But we have people that are way, way over here that are just like, if somebody plays bad, they're a bum. And then people that are over here that are like, I want my team to lose all their games so we can fire everybody and start over. Like, it's not even really a tightrope. It's a pretty wide road. Just stay in the lane of rooting for Arizona State and being objective about the fact that this is a process. And one of the things they need to work on is hitting receivers in the hands. That's it.
A wise man once said that winning is good.
Hey,
that's true.
Yeah, so we'll see. Because as Cam Scadaboo said, this is a year that is made up of 3 seasons of 4 games each. So one is I think has got off to a promising start, promising if imperfect. We'll see how they respond. Coming up here over the next 4 games after the bye. And how Sam Levitt, continues to grow, or if he maybe is plateauing a little bit. We'll revisit this, but on a more positive note, gentlemen, first 4 games, what has been really impressive to you? What do you feel are this team's greatest strengths after 4 weeks?
I mean, I'll say that they've shown quite a bit of resolve, and that can even be shown. You think resolve, and you think, gritty battles and things like that. You can have resolve against a team like Wyoming when you just, put a foot on their throat and never let up. You have resolve when you don't allow that Mississippi State comeback to be too catastrophic. Obviously, Texas State had what it had, and even against Texas Tech, even though it didn't result in a victory. Now then, I think that's something that can have that, as Ralph mentioned, that house of cards type of situation to it, because the most common scenarios of using that resolve are facing some sort of adversity, some sort of significant adversity, putting yourself maybe in a bad position or letting things happen to you. And if that happens too much, then that is going to weigh on your psyche too much in order to continue that high level of resolve. But through these first 4 games of, you've seen a toughness. You really can't count this team out, again, even in one defeat. Whereas especially last year and even before it, and even, other games historically, even in good, otherwise very good season, 8-win seasons, things like that, you've just had games that completely ran away from ASU at an early point, and there was never a chance. You think like that Washington State game at home, a couple years ago when the 96 team was around. So I think that's something that, you certainly have to be pleased with. That's been one of the more consistent qualities of this team.
Yeah, I'm super just impressed with the defense. I think Brian Ward's doing a fantastic job. On this schedule, Joe, you were talking about context. You have a GJ Kinney coach team, you have Texas Tech, and you have Jeff Lebby coach team. And they've given up an average of 200 yards passing a game. They haven't given up a 300-yard game yet. They have 3 games where they've held the opponent under 4 yards a carry, 2 games where they've held the opponent under 1.5 yards a carry. They're +5 in turnovers. Defensively, this is a very, very good team. And you just don't want it to become the 2009 Sun Devils. Like that's a nightmare, right? Where you have 9 games where they hold an opponent to like 27 or less, and you win 3 games on the season. That's the thing that you just really, really want to avoid. You want to make sure that you don't waste a good defense. I won't say elite, not quite yet, but like they're not above average. They're above that. Like this is a B+ defense, and you don't want to go 6-6 with a B+ defense if you don't have to.
And there's a defense that should be getting healthier after the bye week. They've been playing without some key guys. I mean, I think their highest upside cornerback in LT Welch is barely seen the field. He's been out. He could have been sorely used against Texas Tech. Jacob Kangaika has made an impact when he's been out there. Jordan Crook finally got back. Prince Dorbaugh finally got back, and those guys are slowly mixing in a little bit. So I think that's defense overall. Yeah, to your point, Ralph, is really got some really high upside, and this with an offense that maybe is trying to figure itself out in the pass game, it's going to be leaned on a little bit more and more. Hopefully not to the point of breaking that we saw a season ago, but maybe even more specifically, what's really impressed me outside of the resolve and the will and the ability to overcome adversity, just the secondary in general. Like Xavier Alford and Shamari Simmons in particular have been really outstanding. The way Simmons has been able to move over to a nickel and play that position after Mason Williams retired from football. Shamari's just been terrific, and Miles Rouser has no regard for his body or anybody else's. And
I can't wait to talk about Miles Rouser with you guys.
Let's no time like the let's get the ghost discourse going.
Okay, I like him, and I have no complaints. That's my hot take.
Even after that penalty, that the very dumb penalty, no way around it. But he had a damn good game against Tech.
He got away with targeting twice against Texas State, I believe, or it could have been Mississippi State. I don't know. He's involved though. I think you need guys like him. I do, and I got some pushback putting that out there. Obviously, if you are in a razor-thin margin situation, you don't want to make mistakes. And that's why we got to get the quarterback play up, because then every player on the team's mistake is going to get blamed. If you can point to one thing that went wrong, because everything is so close, then yeah. And obviously, obviously taunting is a dumb penalty, and I'm never going to convince old heads who were happy when the NFL outlawed touchdown dances, and who have a poster of Larry Fitzgerald just because he handed the ball to the ref. Like, I'm never in a million years going to convince those people that what Miles Rouser did was good, and I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying I have no complaints. You need a dog on your defense. You need a hitter. You need an intimidator. You don't realize what gets changed about the way someone runs an offense because someone goes a little bit outside bounds once or twice. Joe, help me out here. You're a wrestling fan. You get it. Intimidation matters.
That's right. You got to be able to psych them out. I was just making a reference. I was talking about basketball not too long ago, and that is a critical part of that cinematic masterpiece. And yeah, and I agree. And he's a throwback kind of guy. It's unfortunate because the person that he really reminds people a lot about is someone that you don't really want to be probably talking about too much publicly.
Yeah, that's a name that's come up in the press box just in terms of the stylistic comparison. But yeah, that's a. Ugh.
Yeah, and of course, for those who don't know, we don't need to go into. We're talking about Mitchell Fright Night Friedman from the '90s. But yeah, I mean, obviously that one penalty was not great and quite bad, and again, it didn't necessarily result in anything immediately consequential, but just something that you can't have happen. But it's the kind of guy that you don't want to really rein it in too much because you want that to be there. You know, if you handcuff him, then that takes away from what he brings to the table. And he's someone that's been a very pleasant surprise, someone that probably, when Mason Williams was in the fray, was not necessarily being counted in the starting lineup. And here he is, he's your leading tackler on the year, trending well toward a triple digit tackle season, and somebody that, again, can be that intimidator and can be someone that can set that tone, and you can make plays where, when you do it the right way and the clean way, or if you just happen not to have a penalty flag thrown against you for what you do, as Ralph was saying, that can adjust what other teams do. And ASU is going to need that as it faces some of the teams that it's going to face, some of whom are nationally ranked, some of whom are, kind of perennial powers or have just been very, very successful lately. Teams that think that they're going to walk all over ASU, when you have a guy like that can get right in your face, knock out some teeth, do it legally, that can kind of level the playing field, at least from a psychological perspective, or at least come close to that.
Oh, yeah. Just the next time you send a receiver over the middle. That the next time you move the pocket to roll your quarterback out and he's the one spying, he is having an impact on the game right now. And because the only time you are going to hear his name, because they don't announce who makes every single tackle on every single broadcast, especially when you're at the games. But who gets a penalty. You learn their names pretty quick if it happens more than once. And so I'm not mad at it. That's all I'm saying is and I pointed out, I kind of gave like a list of observations from the game, and I was like, I feel like the defense is playing out of their mind, and I'm not mad at Miles Rouser in the slightest. And that one was probably the one that got the most pushback from people. Like, no, you gotta play smart. You can't cost your team. All of those things are true in a vacuum, but you also have to play loose. I think that's a big reason why they lost to Texas Tech, is because Texas Tech is going to score in bunches. You can't tense up. Shout out to basketball. That is not. Never mind. We're not going to go down that road. But
that would have been a multi-hour tangent that I think
yes
breezed by us.
I was just going to make a trailer hitch reference, and I don't think there was a reason to do so.
So speaking of Rouser, he is like kind of moving to the next category. He's like one of the guys that's really kind of impressed me most in terms of like exceeding the expectations, because obviously with the kind of the shuffle in terms of the secondary, the safeties in particular, and how he's been able to play. Got another guy like Elijah O'Neal, who has been forced in the starting lineup and really been one of the most impactful guys along the edge. Now with Dorwa's back, it'll be interesting to see how that deeper defensive end rotation, that edge rotation gets. But who are some other guys that maybe have exceeded your expectations 4 games in?
Keith Abney is great in coverage. I think he's great in coverage, and I think he's prevented a lot of. I think he's a guy that Todd Graham would have loved to put out on an island. Is what I'm trying to say. I thought he's done a pretty good job in coverage, and just defensively, I think the linebackers are also fantastic at keeping people in front of them, playing sideline to sideline, being aggressive. Obviously, a big reason why the Wyoming game went the way it did is because of the second play of the game. I think the Arizona State benefited a great deal from the transfer portal as far as linebacker play, especially with having Romney, and we miss Romney in an election year, and he'll be back soon, hopefully.
Yeah, I'd say Keyshawn Elliott obviously is someone you talk about. If we're talking about people that exceeded expectations, it's kind of tough to truly throw him in that category because the expectations were very high. But he's by and large he's lived up to that. A lot of it is really the players doing what's expected of them. I think that you can say that Cam Scadaboo is doing more than is expected of him. I mean, he's just carried such a massive workload, but he's putting it out there. I mean, he's a guy that's just getting it done. And then Ralph, I know you said Shimon Matera kind of hit and miss, but the full body work there. He's one of the team's top receivers. He had some really clutch catches, especially against Texas State, and so it's at least good to see that position materialize since that group was completely wiped out due to transfers and graduation. So I think he's someone that at least gives you that proof that there's someone there that can fill that role, that can be a 30-plus reception guy, make some plays, maybe not, in a truly perfect form, but I think it's good. They're guys that are meeting expectations, some that are above.
You brought up Cam Scadaboo, and I think Arizona State's top 3 running backs had 235 combined carries last year. Cam Scadaboo is on pace for 400 touches by himself this season. He's at like 99 right now.
Jeez. That was the next category, is just like the in terms of concerns right there. Overuse of scat. They're this is what the Larry Johnson Herm effect potentially.
Yeah, that could be a problem for Arizona State, and it's definitely a problem in the landscaping world for those who use fertilizer. But yeah, I mean he he touched the ball 36 times, then 5 days later another 25-26. That's insane. That's Herm Edwards, Larry Johnson levels of usage. And now Larry Johnson is like 45 years old, life dedicated to proving that the Egyptians were an alien race. So you want to protect Cam Scadaboo's hobbies in his 40s.
We want him to be eating Burrito Express and not having Egyptian conspiracy theories is basically what we're saying.
That's what I want for all of my children. That's what I want for all of ASU's players as well.
So what are the areas that we were talking about? Just like the depth of the running back room, and who'd have thought that this early it's been tested, but also maybe not up to the task so far because a lot of guys are dinged, and DeCarlos unfortunately has been working his way back. He warmed up before Texas Tech, had a big brace on the left knee, wasn't able to go. Kyson Brown has had some spot duty. Alton McCaskill's still getting ready to go. So all of a sudden, like you're throwing all this stuff and. Every year I talk to Sean Aguano and ask him about the workload, and he's I want to get 2-3 guys involved. I don't want to have a guy that just hammer. And every year there's just one guy who ultimately gets the extreme Eno Benjamin type workload.
And you know what's funny is I honestly there's been a couple of situations where I'm like, why aren't they using him? And so there's still I know he's touched the ball 99 times. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, they had an opportunity to use him in this situation. They didn't. I wish he got the ball in this situation. So that's still even happening from my end. I'm like, just do it again. Do it again. So I don't know. I love it when he has the ball in his hands. That 8-yard run, the slide to take down Mississippi State is iconic to me because if I see the end zone, I'm going for it. I don't have the discipline. I scored 1 touchdown in high school football, and it was on a play where you're supposed to fall on the onside kick. And I said, no, I see the goal line. I'm going to run toward it. So to have the presence of mind to do that, and then for it to be 3rd and 8 and give him the ball and he's able to get that and get us past Texas State. He's just been awesome. And I hope that he continues. I hope there's a situation in which he continues to be awesome. And it's not like a Ryan Terrain type thing where like, remember those 7 awesome games he had? You don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah. I think how the running back room and repetitions and distribution shake out over the next handful of weeks, not just the full duration of the season, but just maybe this next chunk that we're looking at. That's going to be a really big deal because we got such a taste of it in that Wyoming game. And my goodness, was that a beautiful thing to behold with all those guys out there. And obviously, hopefully you're going to get healthier. Raleek Brown seems like he should be all right for the Kansas game. We'll see what happens with DeCarlos Brooks. McCaskill is someone that I've just always, since he came to ASU, he's been such a, intriguing possibility based on what he did years ago at Houston. If he's someone that can get in the swing of things. So if you can integrate these players, keep them healthy, and just have a plan out there, that's going to open up so much for your offense. But, man, it's between the running backs and the tight ends, the last handful of years, there's just always been this tease of this is going to be the year that this group breaks out, not just one player. And it has become like a see it to believe it type of deal. But you just have to think that if they can have the guys healthy, that we know that they can play. Even someone like Kyson Brown, who looked so good in those first couple of games, just hasn't had quite as much of contributions in the last few. So it's going to be something to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still waiting for Curtis Hodges' red zone play. There's so many things. You were correct.
JJ Wilson, what's going to happen here?
Exactly.
All right, so let's maybe one other group that maybe deserves a little bit of scrutiny so far, and it's probably my biggest concern moving forward. Offensive line. The tackles have not played well in terms of pass protection on a consistent basis, at least. I believe Johanna Chora was got for whatever it's worth, the PFF high grade one after the Texas State game. But generally speaking, pass pro isn't there. And even just what I thought was going to be kind of the strength of the line, the interior, I mean, the inability to consistently generate some lanes the last couple of weeks, especially against that Texas Tech defense that gave up over 300 to Wazoo like a couple weeks prior, was concerning to me.
Yeah, I think they've done some positive things. The pocket is getting rolled a lot. We are in a situation with a quarterback who is making one read, then kind of getting happy feet. But there have also been situations where people are on Sam Levitt right away. You had expressed before the season, Brad, that was your biggest area of concern. At least where does it stack up as far, because you were on disaster watch, right? Where does it stack up for at least your personal expectations?
I mean, in terms of what we've seen through the first 4, I was a little heartened. I thought, okay, maybe especially with what they were doing on the ground, and that can maybe mask a little bit in terms of the pass pro, at least the pressure there through the first 2 weeks. But the last couple have not been have been worrisome because I put a lot. Okay, Texas State wasn't great, but how much of it was short week in terms of just maybe the gas tank's a little low. Kenny talked about multiple times that the Bobcats run an odd front and we didn't have enough time to prep. Okay, whatever, we'll see. And then a Texas State defense, which is not going to be mistaken for the Kansas States of the world, that's not a situation that filled me with confidence. So I'm back to maybe that preseason, just like maybe not waving on the red flags and pressing the panic button, but it's not too far. It's within arm's reach because not liking what I'm seeing so far. I mean, Josh Atkins is starting left guard now. I don't think he's a tackle at this level. He's probably projects better at guard, and you're having him be the blindside guy. And you mentioned some of the stuff they've had to do in terms of the moving pockets. So I'm still greatly concerned. Not full on panic, but because I do think that there's some veteran leadership there and some guys that can perhaps maybe rally. And I have confidence in Saga Tuatele for what he was able to put together and construct on a week in, week out basis last season, and given all the disasters there. So we'll see coming out of the bye, but I'm kind of after first couple weeks of getting, maybe a little, okay, maybe they got something going here. Not feeling great.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me is basically there's been that little bit of a tease because you had some confidence built up in those first couple of weeks if you take it game by game. Wyoming returned a lot of defensive starters from a solid defense, and you imposed your will for 60 minutes all over them. Mississippi State, you ran the ball like crazy and against SEC athletes. So you take those two, you have that, solid G5 team from last year with an experienced defense. Okay, you check that box, you win that. Mississippi State, even though they were a losing team last year, they've got SEC athletes, and you were able to do what you did against them. Okay, you feel pretty good. Like, I remember after that second game, we weren't really whining or complaining about the offensive line in any capacity. Then you get to the Texas Tech game where they had some uniqueness and some other things that, this is starting to be concerning. Then you get to Texas Tech where you can't do the things that you thought you could do and that other teams just a week or two prior had been doing against them. And so now you're at this point where you've got, a couple of good games, one, iffy game that resulted in a win, and one game that was pretty displeasing and resulted in a loss. So there are a lot of things about this team, and I'd say the offensive line is near or at the top of the list of it's just a week-by-week thing because there's so much we talked about before we brought Ralph on. To me, the biggest overarching thing at this bye week is trying to figure out the identity of this team, and that position group is going to do a huge, huge part in figuring that out because of how they affect, obviously, the running backs and the quarterback and just the ripple effect that all those groups have on the entire team.
Agreed. And I don't know. I've seen some positive things from Cade Briggs, from Fautanu, from Ben Coleman. I mean, Ben Coleman pushed two guys back at Mississippi State to run that clock out. So I've seen some positive things, but it's just a matter of finding the right people to play tackle. And in a couple of weeks, they're going to be playing against a team that their bread and butter really is the edge rush. And they've got Jeremy Robinson, and he's coming off 2 games where he looked unstoppable. And so you're going to have to be ready because Kansas is going to bring that. So, I'm with you. I think the identity of the team is Cam Scatterbo right now, and that can't be it, right? It has to be something more than that. And if they can get these deep balls going, then he would be so valuable in play action, in my opinion. It's just a matter of whether or not your quarterback can take advantage of maybe some people biting on some play action. So I don't know.
All right, so let's talk about some of the coaching staff here. Obviously, we know the defensive side got things pretty well off to a good start so far, but new offensive coordinator Marcus Royal, and sometimes when the offense struggles, as we've talked about in terms of the inconsistency with the run lately, inability to get kind of the downfield passing game going. The OC is going to be under fire a little bit, and then of course, Kenny Dillingham learned a lot in his first year. Now in year 2, I think we've seen some growth there. But overall, just starting with you, Ralph, maybe, what do you think about just what you've seen from Marcus Arroyo so far, 4 games into his Sun Devil tenure, and also year 2 of Kenny in terms of just the game management?
Yeah, so I think that Marcus Arroyo probably responsible for everything on offense thus far, outside of maybe the 4th down calls. And I say that because Arizona State ran a play-action deep ball on 4th and 1, just like it did with Jaden Rashada against Southern Utah. And Levitt short-arming it actually prolonged the drive because he drew a pass interference. But Kenny has shown that he's out here gambling. He coaches like someone who grew up playing NCAA. Like, if I don't get this 4th down, I'll get the next one. That's and it's fun to watch. It's fun to see the going for 2 to put yourself in a position to win. And if not, we'll get the 2 next time. That made it 30-22 against Texas Tech. He's really from this new school of coaching, analytics, but also a lot of gut, right? As far as Marcus Arroyo goes, you got to get the wide receivers involved. You got to figure out a way to do that. That's on you. So if you have 6 or 7 wide receivers in rotation who see the field, they expect to at some point do more than pass block. So you're sitting at 8 wide receiver receptions per game. Would have been less than that if Sam Levitt didn't hit 3 on that final drive against Texas Tech. So, you have to find a way to get those guys involved. But other than that, I mean, they're 3-1. and old Mike D'Antoni saying the team with the most points at the end of the game had the best defense. Right? So Texas Tech absolutely did not have the best defense against Arizona State, but they had the most points. They get credit for that win, and according to Jalen Conyers, Arizona State also took advantage of some just abysmal coaching from Mississippi State's defensive staff. And I read also some data that up until the Texas Tech game, only on 24% of plays that Arizona State ran did they have 6 or more players in the box. So defenses have not been taking Arizona State seriously. I don't expect a lot of Big 12 teams to make the same mistake. So Arroyo has to be on his stuff. There has to be more options than just one running back. But as far as Kenny Dillingham, he seems engaged, seems to know what's going on, has managed to not get thrown out of a couple of games, has managed to not commit any crimes after they put 1 second back on the clock after the broadcast ended. He is protecting his quarterback certainly better than any of the offensive linemen are. And he is taking responsibility for everything that isn't necessarily going ASU's players' way. I think he's proved himself to be a good public-facing leader, but you can tell he wants to win right now. And that I feel like he is the only person on earth with that expectation of this team. We're talking like double-digit wins. He wants it in 2024. And so to carry those expectations when I don't think most people have them for him has also been very interesting, because that goes into how he prepares this team. And it's possible that they're more ready than they would have been. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to the quarterback, and that's Arroyo and Dillingham's job to figure out that they're brought here to do.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much nailed it right there. You just got to get more guys involved. I mean, you talked a lot about the wide receiver group. A guy like one that pops out to me, like Malik McClain was all everything in fall camp. Hasn't even entered the stat book, though he's played in every game. The running backs, there have been some health issues, of course, and that can't be ignored. But there have also been more guys available than have been used. And as you mentioned, if Scadaboo, bless his heart, if he's going to be touching the ball 50 times a game, people are going to punish him. They're going to hone in on that. They're going to figure that part out. I mean, when you play Utah, when you play Kansas State, when you play these other teams that have a tremendous amount of talent, that's something that if it gets exposed, you pull at that thread and it's just going to potentially pull the whole thing apart unless they mix it up a little bit. So I've said it multiple times, but I'm really hopeful and curious of how this bye week will be used, and if we'll see some new wrinkles, hopefully, again, with greater player availability against Kansas and beyond, because it's not sustainable. I mean, the workload that Scadaboo had last year, all things considered, was not sustainable, and his, offensive workload this year is significantly greater than that, and so that's even less sustainable. So again, very curious to see what lessons are learned and what's applied as we move forward past this bye week.
All right, so as we wind down here, I think there's one big question that we should kind of tackle and dive into. Obviously, the external, national, regional expectations of this program could not have been lower. 16th, dead last in the Big 12. Now I know I think Joe, you and I had 5-7 as our preseason record prediction. Ralph, did you make a preseason? What was your vibe heading into the year?
6-6.
Okay, so relatively, in the same region there. Now they stand 3-1 heading into the bye with a struggling Kansas team on deck, and of course, some big hitters left to go on the schedule. How has this 4-game start impacted your expectations for this program, kind of comparatively, and is this something that going forward, is going to be something that harbinger of good things, or is it kind of something that now that you're getting into the heart of conference play, it's maybe something that's going to regress to the mean?
I mean, for me, I'm in a tough spot with that question because I'm honestly not ready to abandon that 5-7 prediction, but I'm also not necessarily saying I'm dying on that hill. I know we've talked a lot about what's up ahead on the schedule, and just to kind of put some numbers on it, ASU's 8 remaining opponents have a combined record right now 24-7, and if you take Kansas State out of that, you've got 7 teams combining for a 23-4 record. Now, thankfully, the 3 teams that are undefeated right now, again, I get teams have only played 3-4 games, but the undefeated teams ASU has all at home, so that's helpful there. 4 teams are currently ranked in the top 25 that ASU still has yet to play. You have some teams that are playing, way above their predicted pay grade, the likes of, BYU and things like that. And then again, you look at the teams that ASU doesn't play in this much larger new conference. There are 5 Big 12 teams right now that are either 500 or 1-3. There's nobody that's winless. And ASU only plays one of those 5 this season, and that's Kansas coming up this next game. So there is, I really think that there's a tremendous amount on the line for this, October 5th game against Kansas. It's at home. It's against a team that's struggling this year. And then up ahead, you've got a lot of challenges to where if you drop that one, then, it's going to be tough to find your next win, and things can start to gravitate toward a negative direction. So, I mean, this season can go a lot of different ways. It can be 2016 all over again, or it can be something that exceeds expectations. That's why, the whole identity of this team and an identity that is sustainable is something that is so pivotal to develop.
For me, it's what I wanted to know by this point in the season is I wanted to look ahead at the 8 remaining games and say, does Arizona State have a chance? Do they have a chance based on what we've seen so far? Do they have a chance against their upcoming opponents? And I would say in 6 of those games, they do. Based off of how things have shaken out right now, how things have shaken out for those teams. And I don't want to bring up the whole argument over a state press reporter saying the ASU got lucky or whatever. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds about that, but if you were to take another Big 12 team and say, look at their Big 12 slate, they've got, the teams that they're facing are 23, 24-7. ASU would be amongst them, right? Because some of these teams are not. Texas Tech had a 1-point win over Abilene. Kansas is going to come in with a big win over Lindenwood. Do you know where that is? I do not. So, some of it is indicative of a team that is good, right? And Arizona State, I don't think, has to worry about Colorado, who offensively I'm not 100% sure they could handle. And I don't think they have to worry about Iowa State, who looks like the most physical team in the conference right now. So looking at the schedule, I look at it and I say maybe outside of Utah and BYU in every single one of these games, they have a chance. You got a turnover-prone quarterback in Jalen Daniels, whose entire hype of his college career comes down to 1 month in 2022 and 1 bowl game. Right? You have a Cincinnati team that defensively is outplaying its expectations, but offensively doesn't look that good. Ollie Gordon, in his last 3 games, has 45 carries for 120 yards. He's averaging less than 3 yards a carry.
Yeah, that Gundy continues to be weird with his offense.
Yes, and they have 6 super duper senior, like 6th-year senior, 6 6th-year senior offensive linemen, and they can't get 3 yards a carry with Ollie Gordon, who people thought was going to compete for the Heisman. So I'm looking at what they've done so far. I'm like, wow, ASU has a shot. KJ Jefferson has to come to Tempe. He's been turnover prone. ASU's good against the run, and their biggest weapon is RJ Harvey. ASU's going to have a chance in that game, unless UCF wears those space uniforms. Those are gorgeous. I'm sure they'll never lose in them. But then, you look at Arizona, they are not as good as expected. You look at Kansas State. Arizona fans were ready to fire everybody after that Kansas State game because they said, we just got blown out by a bad team. And you found out just a couple days later that they were right. Kansas State didn't score a touchdown against BYU. So there are winnable games. There are probably 6 toss-ups left. If Arizona State plays like it's playing right now, doesn't even improve, and everybody else plays like they're playing right now. There are 6 games where you look at and say, all right, this is probably a toss-up. Utah, I don't love the matchup. I don't love the experience. At least it's going to be in Tempe, so maybe give them like a 20% chance to win that game. And BYU looks so disciplined right now that I look at some of the mistakes ASU's been making. I'm like, I'm glad that that's later on down the line. Maybe they'll fall off. I don't know. But for the rest of these games, I feel pretty good based on the first 4 games that ASU is going to be competitive this year.
It's interesting, like the BYU point. I mean, because to me, like Provo BYU versus Road BYU is pretty stark in most situations. So that one, I was, and it's interesting you put that in kind of with Utah. I agree with you on Utah. I think that one's pretty much in a category of like you're not going to get that one. But BYU, that's interesting. But yeah, one of the things that's really jumped out to me just overall in the Big 12 in this early dalliance with it. I mean, this is just probably as up in the air and as unpredictable as all the preseason prognostications said it was. So I think ASU is like firmly in that mix. And for me, I had 5-7 preseason. I thought that in order to even consider getting to a path to the postseason, you had to go 3-1, and they did. And I kind of, most of the things, I think you got to get Cincinnati. Should be, and I think they get Kansas. Maybe UCF, Arizona. You never know. So I think there's a lot of coin flip games in Big 12 life. I think we're going to have to kind of come to terms with over the next several years.
So here's the question: would you be more comfortable taking those 6 games and flipping a coin at this point? Would you be more comfortable taking those 6 games and flipping a coin, or letting it play out? Do you think that it's a better than 50% chance
that ASU makes a bowl?
Well, in those 6 games, or even if you want to say 7, if you want to throw BYU in there,
I do.
Would you feel more comfortable flipping a coin to try to get 3 heads in 7 tries, or letting ASU play this schedule out? What makes you more comfortable?
I'd flip the coin.
Really?
I'm curious. I just don't know what this team is truly capable of. I mean, of the item that we really haven't talked about and is what it is those first 2 wins, those 2 opponents. Again, they're not making the wins look as good as they could have been and as good as they felt when they happened. So I just don't. I'm not saying this team is not there. I just don't know if they are there to win those 50-50 games, to win the road games in Manhattan, or back in Oklahoma State where they've been, and these ones that they're not that far off of, but are they ready for that step? If you have a BYU team with momentum, even playing in Tempe, probably going to have a very large BYU contingent. All these little footnotes about things. Really just ready to see what this team is all about. I've used that identity word so many times it could be a drinking game by now. I have a lot of curiosity. I'm still here after 4 weeks of the season saying, I'm certainly pleased and certainly pleasantly surprised. I just don't know how that projects for the remaining 8 games when you take into consideration how ASU has played either in full games or in chunks against a couple teams that aren't going to do too much this year, and 2 other teams that could be good but need to be figured out. So there's just a lot to be still proven given the nature of the schedule to begin the year.
Okay.
Those first 2 wins for me, those were, if they are in fact going to continue their trend and be bad teams, which all indications are at this point, ASU did what a decent team should do to a bad team. They blew the doors off Wyoming, and other than just kind of that easing off the gas a little bit and letting Mississippi State, they took care of business there. And what I think is making that perhaps maybe coin flip and having the to your point, Ralph, of just I think that if they played out those 7 games, I think they find 3. Is just the adversity that they've been able to overcome. As Kenny Dillingham's put it a few times, just the ability to counterpunch. Which, when's the last Sun Devil team that was able to do that? Like, what Sun Devil team would able to, before this year, could get that win in the fashion that the Texas State game played out, like the 2014 squad. Because I don't know, like none of the I don't have any confidence that any of the Herm era teams could have taken that, overcome that adversity in game, and rallied back. And that I think is what I think is kind of the key differentiator and probably the biggest takeaway for me of these first 4 games is that this team that can overcome some adversity. Now they're still, maybe not as talented as a lot of these teams on the schedule, not as deep, but I think that intangible quality is going to serve them well now and probably more importantly and more acutely in 25 and beyond.
Yeah, I think that, that resolve factor, the teams that you'd have to mention over the last 15 or even 20 years are really those double-digit win teams. 2013, 2014, even 2007. If you remember 2007, I swear that 2017 team, they weren't even comfortable until they were down 10-0, 14-0, 19-0. I mean, they had multiple wins. Again, that's a while ago. Several wins, almost week in, week out, were come from behind at early deficits. So again, that is the hallmark. You're going to have to battle like that if you're going to win double-digit games within a season. So I'm hoping that resolve can be the quality that supersedes the concerns, because if you can fight like that and have better starts, if ASU can get back to the way it was starting ball games for those first 3, and if this past weekend can just be an anomaly, that's something that really shifts a mindset. If you can come out strong and if you can have that resolve, you build up a little bit of a lead and then, maybe it trickles away, but then you can also fight to keep it back. That's how you can upset some of these teams. But that is what concerns me by, a couple games of going out on the road. And yes, the first possession for ASU and the first possession for Texas State worked out in ASU's favor. But from there, it really got sideways. Obviously, it went sideways immediately against Texas Tech. So that road component of things and ASU's ability to start games and maintain a high level of play is what I need to see be proven, to be better than what we've seen the last 2 weeks.
I just had a visceral reaction to Joe saying that 2007 was a long time ago. And then I immediately remembered that that's the year that Jake Fette, the most recent ASU quarterback commit, was born. So I guess so. Yes, it's been a minute since 2007. Herm would tell you that he had a couple of those teams, but he just ran out of time. They would have come back if there were more than 60 minutes on the clock. All right, Joe, I'm going to call on a 9-year bit here. If they get to 6 wins, will you please watch The Devil Wears Prada?
Yes, I will do that. That is my
and live tweet it.
If we get
please, just a Zoom, just get us all in here in a room to watch
live reactions. Yeah, if ASU wins 6 games or more, obviously that'll happen. I'm putting that in stone. Ironclad guarantee.
The best part about that is so I've been asking you to watch this movie for 9 years over a joke that I don't even remember, and it was probably like a ask you for 3 weeks to watch it and you'd still be impressed movie. It is not worth 9 years of hype. So now I just hope you don't like it. Before I was convinced you would, and now I just want it to be a negative experience for you.
Major heel turn.
I've never wanted anything for 9 years.
I'm gonna do it. All right, that's on the line. At some point, I got to give, and that's a good yes. All right, I'm in. ASU win 6. Devil's going to be bowling, and the Devil's going to be wearing Prada.
There we go.
All right, so before we thank our sponsors and get on out of here, let's close things out with I tweeted out after the game and got a wide variety of responses. Although I'd say the average is probably the B to B plus. So, gentlemen, give a letter grade for your first 4 games of the Sun Devil season.
I'll go B plus. I kind of want to go A minus because I didn't think that they'd be 3-1 at this particular point. There have been some imperfect nature about it, but I mean, you can't be too displeased. It's like a 89%, like right on the cusp of a higher grade. Again, even though I might be talking about concerns over the duration of the season, and we'll see how that pans out for these first 4 games. One of them was as well played of a game ASU's had in a very long time. The other was close to that, a gritty come from behind win, and then a still gritty game that could have been a lot worse than it was. So the full body of work, I'll go with like a high B+.
To me, it feels like an A paper that you forgot to write your name on. Like, the most important thing is quarterback play. It's currently the biggest question of the team. Other than that, I'm feeling really, really good about what Arizona State has accomplished in contrast to expectations going into this year. If you say we're going to play 3 of the better offenses in the country, we're going to hold all 3 to less than 300 yards passing, we're going to hold all 3 to less than 4.3 yards a carry, 1 to less than 1 yard a carry, and we're going to have a +5 turnover margin through 4 games. I'm like, that's a perfect season. So I would say it feels like an A paper that you forgot to write your name on, but there's still time to go through that bin, write it in pencil, and get your credit.
All right, so as an addendum to that one, Ralph, if ASU gets 6, what are you watching?
Man, so you know that there's like 3 movies
lot.
made before 1994 that I've actually seen. I'll take one from each of you. Shoot, maybe we'll finally launch that the first time, long time podcast. Be the biggest thing we've ever done.
I mean, like the first thing, since you put 94 out there, because so Encino Man's what, 91, 92?
Yeah, I think I'd say Encino Man, Die Hard, Goonies, Ferris Bueller. Those are ones that are going to top the list if they are absent from your collection.
I have not seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll find something good for you.
All right, there we go. I will go with B+ as well, because I said that I thought they would be 2-2. I said that they would lose in our preseason roundtable to Texas State. They did not. I think they're ahead of schedule overall. I think this, like, if they make a postseason run, it's all gravy. But I like the trajectory. There are things that there's some holes and some deficiencies that are evident. But we'll see how things go. But I think that I feel much better about the trajectory and the timeline of this program than I did going in. But obviously college football will change. But B+ sounds good. And so if they win 6, what do I watch?
Man, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Oh God, my wife. Yeah, okay.
It's a little Easter egg for our pre-recorded conversation. It always occurs when Ralph's on board.
And you gotta tweet it in with hashtags and.
We gotta have you on for the BYU game then.
On that note, that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guest, new ASU quarterback commit, Jake Fette, and of course,
I hope you didn't listen all the way through the end. Where did I commit to?
Ralph Amsden. So obviously, you just launched the Forkcast. It's awesome. It's terrific. You're doing the Sun Devil Stasis.
You liked it? Okay, cool. That's good.
That wasn't
an audience of like 5 people I'm trying to impress here. So
that was my.
You enjoy it.
Yeah, that was my. I wasn't just propaganda. Cool. When I was, it was my companion on the flight to Lubbock. Great stuff, and with the Todd of the Week, love that stuff. The signs, like there's some like super Ralphie deep cuts there. So, tell our listeners that after you're putting the cap on appearance 47 for the 5 people out there that don't know who you are, aren't following your stuff, how they can keep up with you.
I'm on Twitter. I live there. You could pay me rent if you want. No, but I tweet from Twitter. I tweet from Twitter, and then I have a podcast, and then we do Sun Devil Spaces on Wednesday night. Yeah, you can find me. I'm around. Try not to find me with multiple Twitter accounts and say that you don't have multiple Twitter accounts. That happened this week. People wanted to argue ball, and they were one person pretending to be many. If we could avoid that and just save if you're going to call me an idiot, I'll get it if you just do it the one time.
Of all the people in the world to come at on Twitter, is like Twitter PI Ralph Amsden is the last guy to do it. He will find you.
Yeah, I also hope that I'm not just. I feel like I've calmed down. I feel like an old dog at this point. Like I'll bark, but I'm not going to get up and chase the car. So I'm just here to have fun. ASU football is fun now. I'm having so much fun listening to Speak of the Devils and not grinding my teeth. And it's cool. It's cool to have a renewed sense of hope, a renewed purpose and direction for this team. And I mean, if it's my podcast, your podcast, or whatever, just get involved, because it's not, there are pockets of good, and you really got to ride those waves to make it through the rest of. I think we're going on 10 years of not finishing in the top 25. So I just want to commend you. And if I didn't say it last time, I want to say it again. What you two have done through this like dry season, of just keeping people engaged, keeping people in the know, even through the portal when you invest time and energy in getting to know a player and then they just bounce. It has been important. I know maybe it doesn't seem that way in comparison to like everything else that's going on in the world, but like people need a release and they need an escape. And I think for the longest time, you guys have done the absolute best job of it. And so you deserve a good season. You deserve 6 wins. You deserve to be watching the Devil Wears Prada.
Well,
Hope
much
that payday is
appreciated. So I guess that's a roundabout way of saying that we're old. We've been around too long. It's season 14. We've seen a lot.
We're getting real close, a couple years away from like you're giving the comparison of the quarterback recruit, being born in a year that we clearly remember.
Oh, they just offered an 8th grader, buddy,
who probably wasn't even alive when we dropped our first episode. Like, we're getting into that sort of territory.
You listen to it in the crib.
Oh man, jeez.
I've had people tell me that they listen to it, maybe not intentionally, to fall asleep to. I'm like, is that a compliment? I'll take it as such, man.
Oh man. In any event, make sure you can follow the show on the social media side. You can follow the show on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. Ralph, I don't think you gave your handle. It's at Ralph Amsden. So
that is true. And tag me. If you listen to this, if you made it to the end of the show, tag me and Joe and Brad in your favorite Devil Wears Prada gif. I want to know who listened to the end.
It's going to be a flurry.
If you do, and I get that tweet, I will send you a collection of Speak of the Devils stickers. We have some good ones.
Reply in kind with probably a professional wrestling gif of some sort.
And make sure, in order to do that, follow me on social media at bdenny29.
And follow me, Joe Healy 42, and giving you the lightning round of our awesome sponsors here. Support them. They support us. They support ASU and the Sun Devil community, of course. Jones Auto Group, the wonderful folks at devilsdigest.com, Troy Skoma, and all the wonderful people at Cactus Sports, our incredible food partners in Burrito Express and Spaghetti Shack, and, of course, Sun Devil Family Charities.
Yeah, and then make sure that you also drop us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I will be back next week to preview the critical game against Kansas.